Today's video is sponsored by Raycon, my go-to pair of earbuds for the past 3 years now. With 8 hours of playtime and 32 hours of battery life, Raycon earbuds are extremely reliable and convenient, making them your best friends for long workout sessions at the gym or lazy weekends on the sofa. They're super comfortable, what with their optimized gel tips for the perfect in-ear fit, and I regularly fall asleep wearing them while listening to something spooky. For more physically demanding activities, you don't need to worry about them falling out. Raycon earbuds stay in place, no matter what. Different situations call for different audio options. With Raycon earbuds, you can seamlessly switch between 3 customizable sound profiles. Pure sound, which I use whenever I'm losing myself in a podcast or audiobook. Balanced sound for warmth and depth whenever I'm vibing to some lighter tunes. And bass sound, which really brings my old school hip-hop playlist to life. With the press of a button, you can also alternate between noise isolation mode and awareness mode. The former for when you want to block out the world, and the latter for when you want to hear what's going on around you. Right now, viewers of my channel can get a huge discount on Raycon products. Click the link in the description box, or go to buyraycon.com/masquerade, and you'll get a whopping 15% off your Raycon purchase. Be part of the next wave of premium wireless audio with Raycon. In January of 1968, a 21-year-old single mother named Sandra Jackson was living with her 5-month-old daughter, Kimberly, in the small northern English town of Norton. One evening, as Sandra waited for her daughter's bathwater to cool, she began warming up a bottle of milk in her apartment's kitchen. All the while, little Kimberly played in her stroller in the back garden. Her stroller was fitted with a set of wooden rattles that would keep her entertained while Sandra fulfilled her motherly duties. The layout of the home was such that she could keep an eye on Kimberly if the kitchen's rear door remained open. At some point, Sandra wandered into one of the home's front rooms, and, through the large bay windows, she spotted a young man pushing what appeared to be the exact same model of stroller as the one that Kimberly was in. Sandra observed the young boy with a kind of casual curiosity, noting that the stroller he was pushing lacked the kind of wooden rattles that she had attached to her own. Therefore, in her mind, it couldn't have possibly been the same stroller that her daughter was in. Yet, as she walked back into the kitchen and looked out of the open rear door, she began to panic. Little Kimberly was gone. It was then that Sandra realized with abject horror that she hadn't observed a young man pushing a similar-looking stroller, but had actually unknowingly witnessed the kidnap of her own infant daughter. After contacting the local authorities, an intensive search of the surrounding area commenced, with one officer searching an area called Billingham Bottoms. Billingham Bottoms was a popular fishing spot, consisting of a medium-sized lake, along with several smaller ponds. It was as the officer walked among them that he spotted something which sent a chill down his spine. Floating face down and lifeless in one of the smaller ponds was baby Kimberly. The callous murder of this infant girl caused a storm of public outrage, and the local police force sought to catch Kimberly's killer as quickly as possible. Investigators discovered that Sandra's back garden was accessible via a short alleyway that lacked any kind of fence or gate. That meant that just about anyone could have crept down there and taken Kimberly unopposed. However, detectives also noted that the garden wasn't visible from the main street. That meant that Kimberly's killer had either spontaneously walked down that alleyway, saw her in the stroller alone, and that this was a crime of opportunity, or, more chillingly, they'd been able to look into the garden from a nearby vantage point, and had been watching Kimberly for quite some time. When interviewed by the police, a grieving Sandra described her daughter's kidnapper as being about 5 feet tall and between the ages of 12 and 14 years old. He had an average build, a mess of dark, bushy hair, and had been wearing a green anorak at the time of the kidnapping. Sandra claimed to have had no idea who the boy was, or why he may have targeted her daughter. Based on Sandra's description of the boy, a sketch artist scribbled a rough image of him, and copies were distributed door to door in hopes that somebody might recognize him. The police also accompanied a heartbroken Sandra on a tour of 19 local schools, the goal of which was to identify one of the students as her daughter's killer, Yet even with such an extensive investigation, the police failed to find their perp. For some, the idea that such a young person could commit such a heinous act was almost too horrible to consider. Cynics began to speculate that Sandra was trying to cover up the fact that she had been the one to drown her own daughter. Her failure to identify the boy that she had witnessed was because he didn't exist. For the most part, the level of grief and guilt that Sandra displayed convinced most people of her innocence, and this belief was further cemented in the years that followed, when Sandra would push for multiple re-examinations of her daughter's case. At the time, much of the public and investigative discourse surrounded the killer's potential motive. Coming up with a reason why a young man might take an infant's life in such a way was as morose as it was difficult. But what if Kimberly's killer hadn't acted maliciously as some people had assumed? The police began to explore the idea that Kimberly's killer may have had some sort of learning difficulty, that he had been wandering around the neighborhood, spotted Kimberly, and then decided to take her on a walk down to Billingham Bottoms. While showing Kimberly the ponds where the tadpoles grew, the boy may have accidentally dropped her in the water, panicked, and then run off without realizing the severity of his actions. It was a plausible theory, but it was one that was ruled out by the fact that Kimberly's kidnapper had removed the wooden rattles from her stroller. Without those rattles, her stroller would make less noise and would be less recognizable to anyone who spotted him. The fact that the killer had taken the time to remove them meant that this was no accident. A huge amount of time and effort was thrown into the hunt for Kimberly's killer, but sadly, they were never identified, and the case eventually turned cold. For the past 36 years, the case has remained unsolved. In 2004, an elderly Sandra Jackson once again called for Kimberly's case to be revisited by Cleveland police. "The killer's fingerprints should have been all over the stroller," she said. "I want to know if any were kept, and if the case can be looked at again. I was young at the time, and so naive, and didn't understand investigations, but things have come on so far since then." With each passing year, the memories of Kimberly Jackson's murder fade ever more into the past. Yet, despite the fact that some refuse to forget her, one person in particular must be unable to escape the memories of their own horrific actions. Perhaps they feel remorse and have long suffered in their silent guilt. But maybe, just maybe, they look back on that memory of drowning little Kimberly, and they smile. On the morning of February 23rd, 1987, 23-year-old Jay Potter Mintz received a phone call from her mother. Jay was living with her infant son in Leland, North Carolina, having recently separated from her husband, who was stationed with the US military in Germany. To support herself, Jay got a job as a waitress at a restaurant in nearby Wilmington, and had just started dating again. Since the following day would mark her son's second birthday, Jay was busy preparing a small party for him. It had been a busy morning too, as just an hour earlier, she had sold a waterbed to a man who had spotted her advertisement in a local paper. Due to an unfortunate miscomputation, Jay's mother had actually promised the waterbed to another buyer, but after failing to make a note of the buyer's phone number, she was unable to call him back to cancel the sale. Thing is, her mother had already given the man directions to Jay's house. Jay assured her mother that she had diffused the situation with a polite apology. Suitably reassured, Jay's mother Lorraine ended the call, unaware that it would be the last time she would ever talk to her daughter. Later that day, Lorraine once again tried to call her daughter to confirm that the sale was successful, but this time, Jay didn't answer the phone. After becoming increasingly concerned, Lorraine drove over to Jay's house to make sure she was okay. When she arrived, she could immediately tell something was horribly wrong. The door to Jay's house was wide open. After Lorraine walked inside, she heard the sound of Jay's 2-year-old son screaming at the top of his lungs. After a brief search of the home, Lorraine burst into an upstairs bedroom and was greeted by a sight that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The sight of Jay lying on a blood-soaked mattress. Her throat had been slit, and her torso was a mess of multiple stab wounds. Lorene found her 2-year-old grandson alive and well in another room. She asked if he was okay, and he simply replied, "Mean man hurt mummy. Mummy, cry." Jay's murder sent shockwaves throughout the small town of Leland. The public heard how a newspaper clipping of Jay's waterbed ad had been found left behind at the scene, seemingly confirming that she had been murdered by a prospective buyer. Jay's 63-year-old mother Lorene was so grief-stricken that she passed away from a heart attack just a few months after local media revisited the case in 2007. It was said that she felt such a soul-crushing guilt that she had provided her daughter's killer with her address, that the stress literally killed her. "She lived with so much pain and guilt for the rest of her life," said Lorene's surviving daughter, Jill Watts. "Her heart was broken. She always said if she had arrived earlier, maybe she could have deterred the killer. She thought maybe things would have turned out differently." Jill had been driving over to Jay's from her home in Colorado on the day of the slaying, and didn't receive the bad news until she arrived. "It was devastating," she later said. "One day we're planning a birthday party, and the next, she's just gone. We had plans. She had a life to live. It's been a nightmare ever since. Jay was kind-hearted and a good person and loved her kids. I can't think of anyone who didn't like her. Why someone would want to do this to her is unimaginable." During the course of their investigation, homicide detectives questioned a cousin of Jay's named Angela. Angela had been living with Jay in the months preceding her murder. Interestingly, she told detectives that Jay had been receiving a large amount of unwanted attention over the previous few months, and that she believed at least 2 or 3 men had been bothering her. Angela claimed that one of the men would rake out the words, "I love you, Jay," in the gravel driveway of her cousin's home. Another used to bombard her with red roses, and even arrived unannounced at her workplace in attempts to romance her. Angela was quick to add that Jay politely but firmly rejected her potential suitors, but there were a handful that just couldn't seem to let go. Angela also noted that Jay seemed to receive some deeply disturbing phone calls too. On one occasion, when Angela answered Jay's phone, she heard a gruff voice on the other end of the line, growling obscenities and threats of violence. Then, just a week before the murder, Angela heard a soft sobbing coming from Jay's room. She walked inside, only to find Jay curled up on the bed, quietly weeping. When Angela asked her what was wrong, Jay replied that she had just woken up from a dream in which a man was trying to kill her. "After it happened, I couldn't shake what she said," Angela told a journalist back in 1997. "It's like she knew what was about to happen." After a failure to identify any potential suspects caused the investigation to stall, a diversion of resources further impeded the hunt for Jay's killer, and it wasn't long before the case went cold. Even after 29 years, the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office still actively worked to solve Jay's case. In 2016, an officer by the name of Lieutenant Israel West was placed in charge of the investigation. During a press conference, he said that a number of different suspects had been questioned over the years. "We don't consider Jay's case a cold case. It's just unsolved," said Lieutenant West. "I put as much energy and care into her case as I would want if it were me or someone I loved." Lieutenant West also stated that the future of the case rested on any potential DNA evidence recovered from the scene, and that the Sheriff's Office were waiting on the results of an advanced DNA recovery procedure that might shed some light on the killer's identity. Perhaps the detail which has most baffled investigators over the years is how Jay's killer was able to get inside and out of her home without anyone noticing him. Jay's house was situated on a very busy main road, in a neighborhood where people regularly walked or cycled through the streets. "It all seemed very calculated," a family member later said. "Almost like the guy really knew what he was doing, you know. But the thing I fear the most is that whoever killed Jay has gone on to kill other women over the years. I mean, who knows how many more times this has happened, and the guy's just gotten away with it. It's that final sentiment that seems to be the most terrifying. When a killer goes uncaught, injustice is just the first of many poisonous effects, and an even greater toxin is the threat to those ignorant of their peers' mortal sins, making us all ripe targets to be their next innocent victim. On the afternoon of September 10th, 2021, Virginia-based newlyweds Corina Solorzano and Jason Cortez were making their way down a popular trail in Los Angeles' Ernest E. Debs Regional Park. 29-year-old Jason was from Silver Springs, Maryland. He attended Potomac Senior High School, and, following his graduation, went on to receive a Bachelor of Arts in Film and Video Studies at George Mason University. Jason was heavily involved in student organizations and was an early member of the Iota chapter of Delta Kappa Alpha, a cinematic professional fraternity. This is where he first discovered a passion for screenwriting, movie directing, and, above all, photography. On that fateful day in September, Jason was visiting Los Angeles to photograph Debs Park as part of a lucrative photography project. Having tied the knot just a year before, he and Corina were very much in love, and they were looking forward to spending their first holiday season together in their new home that they had purchased back in Virginia. Yet little did they know that they were about to be visited by a chilling and senseless tragedy. At just after 3 p.m, the couple were wandering through the trees, and Jason was snapping pictures as they walked. Then, out of nowhere, the loud crack of a rifle could be heard coming from some nearby bushes. Corina turned to see Jason clutching his chest. Blood was leaking between his fingers. It was then that Corina realized in horror that Jason had been shot. He collapsed into the dirt. A fellow hiker happened across the stricken couple and managed to keep some pressure on Jason's wound. Yet despite the speedy arrival of paramedics, Jason sadly passed away while en route to the hospital. Jason was not only my husband, but he was also my loyal friend, Corina told a press conference the following week. This will be the first holiday season I'll celebrate without him in 7 years, and his family and I are desperate for answers. We need to know who did this and why. We need to understand what happened. We need help. During that press conference, a $50,000 reward was offered for any information which might lead to the capture of Jason's killer. It was also revealed that the bullet that had killed Jason had been fired from as close as 100 yards away. A wanted poster was circulated around neighboring states and featured a composite sketch of what the shooter was believed to look like. The poster described him as a Hispanic male aged between 20 and 30 years old, standing at 5'10", and who was wearing a blood-hooded sweatshirt. Talking to a local news station, the leading detective on the case called Jason's murder a senseless killing. "There is no motive behind this," he added. "It's something I can't explain. I talk to the family. I meet with them on a regular basis, and there's nothing I can say that will help them understand this." According to one journalist, the LAPD have been exploring the idea that Jason was murdered as some kind of gang initiation, and that he was targeted at random by someone whose only goal was to prove themselves capable of taking a life. Others have suggested that his death may have been nothing more than a tragic hunting accident, with some novice hunter mistaking his movements as that of an animal's before opening fire. And yet, ask most hunters, and they'll tell you that the chances of a shooter being so careless are slim to none. If their accuracy at range was anything to go on, they had enough experience to know that what they were firing on was a human, and so it seems malicious intent trumps the possibility of criminal negligence. But who would be possessed by such evil that they'd stalk the hilly trails of Greater Los Angeles with the goal of killing at random? Over the past year or so, the LAPD have poured time and resources into answering that exact question. But, frustratingly, they're no closer to identifying a suspect now than they were in the weeks following Jason's murder. At Jason's memorial service, his father described him as a dedicated, intelligent, free spirit who was loved by many people. He went on to say that, quote, his love for his family and friends transcended over everything. He always had a smile, and made light of every situation he was dealt. He will be missed. While Jason rests in peace, the hunt for his killer continues, and we may have to wait many, many years before a suspect is finally charged. But in the meantime, we can only hope that whoever wandered up into those hills that day, intent on extinguishing an innocent life, doesn't get the urge to do so again. A huge shout out to my supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon. Torpid Chair 1139, Nephus 1988, Lydia Cumo, Jessie Jug, Alex Greensall, Anya Yekaterina Faustov, Asiamina, Azrael Warakai, Chief Cochuaque, Colin Monsma, Connor Louthan, Crawford K. MacDonald, Expand Dong, George Lopez, Gina Valera, Grace Archie, Infamous-senpapi, Kawaii Evil, Larry Mattingly, Leonardo Martinez, Myra Lancaster, Monica Mendoza, Natalie Escobedo, Peter Lodgeraj, Philip Wester, Taylor&Monica Gruenk, The Only Dorita, Zane, Mrs. Yvonne Rankin, and the deck of cards. Thank you guys so much for your support. Finally, a huge thank you to Sam Riding for writing the script for this episode. Be sure to smash that like button or I'll smash you, and you'll be hearing from me again very soon. Until then, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark.